And with those current issues, a lot of you would have heard me, shouting my mantra of make Africa great again. That's my vision. That's my hope. That's my dream. I would love for Africa to establish its greatness. Karibu sana, my people. It is your host, Tracy M, and I am here today for another episode of On the Record Pod. Now, as you are seeing this episode, you all would have probably celebrated Father's Day yesterday. Yeah. And I'm here alone today because I thought I would be as real as I can with you. The whole purpose of me creating this platform was to promote, it was to highlight, it was to encourage everybody who comes across it as to the beauty that is within Africa. Now, I'm particularly in Kenya, and with that comes the good and the bad. And it would be an injustice of me not to give you the full story, not to show you both the good and the bad. And I think it's important that as a whole, we unpack what is going on. We look into what is occurring and just raise awareness for the many beautiful, horrible, contradicting lines that there are. In every country that you visit, in every place that you stay in, and you will see this throughout this podcast, there are many conversations I have with Kenyans, non-Kenyans, and we always discuss the pros, the cons, things we can do better, things we're really good at. We try and engage that conversation to say it out loud, to put it on the record, and to allow others to think further than what they may see, to kind of go further past the scope that's already there. And when we talk about things like Father's Day, which I was going to read out a lovely poem, discuss, the many stories there are behind fathers, present dads, shout out you guys. However, there is something that has occurred or is occurring regarding the young men in Kenya. And these are young men who may or may not be fathers. More so the young men who could have been fathers. And for me, it's scary. For me, it's heart-wrenching. And I pride myself to be on the path of being a humanitarian. So I'm using my platform just to raise awareness, to have a discussion, to let you guys know what's going on. And I'm using the platform today to remember Albert Ojwang. This was a young man who was 31, so younger than me, literally just younger than me. He was a teacher and he was also a blogger, so they say. Now, Albert had voiced his opinion, which we all take for granted. Because right now, what am I doing? I'm voicing my opinion. And this is going to go onto the sound waves. This is going to go wherever it finds itself, whether it finds itself in Zimbabwe, in the Philippines, in the UK, in the US. It travels. But that's the beauty of freedom of speech. It's just a case of us voicing our opinions. And so Albert had made a number of tweets that were regarding a police general. And he was arrested on Friday. He was arrested by the police due to the tweets he had made, supposedly. And he was taken to Nairobi Central Police Station. He was arrested there, detained, and he was interrogated. On the Saturday, it was announced that he had unfortunately passed away due to self-inflicted injuries. Okay. Now, once there was a pathologist who kind of did a inquest into his death. It's not an inquest, that's not the word I'm looking for, but yes, they did an inquest into his death. And they found that, in fact, it wasn't even just one pathologist. There were 5 pathologists who had to check and make sure that the story was corroborating, only to find it wasn't, because he had head injuries. However, these head injuries were not self-inflicted. He didn't sustain them himself. It appears there was heavy trauma. There was some neck compressions that also appeared, and other sort of evidence that pertained to him being brutally murdered. Now, this is, like I said, very scary, because an interrogation should consist of, trying to get to the source of the issue, trying to get information from what I understand. And of course, I am coming from a very somewhat privileged background where, you get into the room, and as I discussed with one of my colleagues, Duncan, I can say no comment. I'll wait for my lawyer. And that's that. But to think that in 2025, we are out here fighting for police brutality in America. We are saying they do not see us for who we are. They see us as criminals. They see us as these villains, these thugs, only to face that kind of treatment in your own homeland. That hits very differently. And that hurts a lot more. Because when you are trying to build a state in which we all support each other, we all grow together, we all build together, only for us to be hurting each other, that is a huge injustice. And for those of you who have me on socials, you would have seen that I explained that it's not right for me to, highlight on the good when I can't talk about the current issues. And with those current issues, a lot of you would have heard me, shouting my mantra of make Africa great again. That's my vision. That's my hope. That's my dream. I would love for Africa to establish its greatness, for us to recognize how rich we are within our resources, how beautiful we are as a people, just to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And I will always, always lead it back to Burkina Faso and the great work they are doing. And that just shows me that it can be done. It can be done. However, we don't want to do the work. And so I challenged myself. Because if we don't want to do the work, who's going to do it? It's not going to be our parents, because, those guys are retiring. It's time for them to rest. They should be sitting at home chilling. We've got Gen Z who are very, very powerful, very, very powerful in their action, in the way they speak, in the way they think, as much as it is different to what we have known, the norm that we have, implemented on ourselves. Somebody still has to do the work. And I feel as though millennials, I'm speaking specifically to you, because we are the merge between the two. So yes, we have somewhat of the olden traits with a kick of the new age stuff. And I think that puts us in a more powerful position than we acknowledge. My mission has always been to bring the diaspora back. It's been to encourage you guys to understand that there is a life back home, that there is success back home. And it looks very different to what we've accustomed as success. But there is also peace in being back home. And it's such a shame because currently the peace is not there. The peace is not there when men have to fear for their lives as to the comments they'll make, the things they will share, and not knowing that I could be on my way home, but there's a Subaru that's following me, and all of a sudden, that's the end. Again, I do acknowledge the privilege that I speak from. I do acknowledge that Perhaps, this isn't my issue, but we need to make it our issue. I honestly believe that we have to stand together. And that's something that as a community, we sometimes lack in. And I can recall the amount of times that, we've had protests in London, we've stood up for police brutality, etc. And as women, we're tired. We are tired for standing up for our dear Black men. But we still have to do it. Unfortunately, we still have to push. We still have to come together as one. And it makes me sad. It makes me sad to think that in a place where there is so much potential, there is so much beauty, there is a lot of greatness that lies within. But somehow, this concept of criticism, constructive criticism, so to say, points of improvement, correction, somehow that is the worst thing that you could ever do. And that doesn't sit right with me. Platforms like this are created to enable people to share their thoughts, to express their feelings, to be as vulnerable as they can be. And this is me being vulnerable because I don't know what could happen after this episode. I don't know which hands this episode will find itself in. However, somebody has to do it. And I feel like we all have a duty. We all have a responsibility to be our brother's keeper. And so in today's episode, as I have highlighted what has gone on, I am standing as a keeper to my brother Albert. I am speaking as his sister, as his friend, as his colleague, as someone of the same nation. I am reaching out and asking you guys to work as a collective. I'm asking you to really dig deep, to really understand, to make yourselves aware of what is going on. And I think it's important to remember those who are near you, because as we often say, tomorrow is not promised. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But I do want to encourage people to still speak, which is dangerous. It's scary. I'm still speaking right now. But again, we have to do it. There's no way that any change can come about if we just hide behind four walls, if we just keep quiet and murmur amongst ourselves. We still have to speak. We still have to create that conversation that brings forth a change. And so today, I'm saying enough is enough. We need to talk. So let's talk. And so as I commend Gen Z, they currently have been out on the streets. They have been protesting whilst this inquest, this investigation into Albert's death is taking place. I look at Gen Z and I applaud them. I commend them because they're willing to do the work that we sometimes aren't. I will be sitting behind my four walls with my Twitter fingers, as usual, promoting, yes, this is not right. This is inhumane. This isn't fair. But there's only so much that has an effect. And this is not me promoting violence. This is not me encouraging people to be violent. I think protests are powerful. They serve a purpose. And growing up, I'm sure many of you will relate to the saying, if you don't hear, you must feel. And I think that's relatable in life. So many times your parents will tell you, don't touch it. It's hot, it's hot, it's hot. And then you don't listen. You do touch it. It's hot. It burns you. You felt it. You understand it. But I think the problem therein lies in the fact that we are not being heard. We are not being listened to. And so when we try to have these conversations, they're shut down. They're shut down because we're not being respectful to our elders. They're shut down because what do you know? You haven't gone through life, so what would you understand? They are shut down because we are not putting ourselves in those positions where these conversations are happening. I'm not sure of the statistics. I wouldn't be able to tell you the percentages, but I know for sure that young people are not putting themselves in parliament, in government, in order to raise that voice and awareness to say, hey, on our angle, this is how we feel. This is what would work for us. And I think that is the biggest challenge we face. The biggest challenge we face as a community, as a generation, to put ourselves in those positions. Because till today, it still amazes me the fact that people who are in these high positions, I can't lie to you, they should all be retired by now. They're in their 60s. Why are you still working? Go home and rest. This should be down to us in our 30s and our 40s. Let's try. We've experienced a bit of the youthful life. It's time to kind of grow on what we've built and make it better. But when you're telling me that, people on the radio, you've been listening to these guys since you're in school, you're now 35 and they're still hosting. They're still on the news. They're still on these platforms taking what's rightfully ours. That in itself is my biggest challenge. And again, I understand the position that I am in. I understand the advantage that I'm in. And so I will continue to challenge myself. I will challenge myself to break that barrier, enter those spaces that I need to be in, and to continue with these conversations. As my main role model, good old Millie Odiambo said, you have to be a bad girl. And if it means that I'm going to be speaking, not recklessly, but, certain things that perhaps I shouldn't be, I have no say in, then hell yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm being a bad girl right now. And trust me, we will definitely make the change that needs to be we will definitely be able to try and make some sort of change that needs to happen.